So ordinarily to start data meetings, we talk about data, but this is our first data meeting. But I want to talk about your last action step, which was go conceptual. So, and I've seen you do that. What steps have, like, what is your rationale for deciding when to do that, and what has been the impact of doing it?
I usually do it when nobody's raising their hand. And then I also pre-plan places to do it where I know that there's not going to be this maybe connection between like understanding that what the text is actually saying and like how it represents something else. When it like really goes into the figurative meaning of things, that's really hard. Then asking the go conceptual question first, and then asking the next question.
And what's been the impact of doing that?
More students are willing to participate both in answering those questions and then in the questions after that, because they can see the connection. And then also I think kind of implicitly it shows that like your prior knowledge and connecting things that you know to text matters. Yeah.
I was gonna say you rehook kids in the lesson, not only because they are like, oh yeah, I kind of know about that, but also like every time I've seen you do it, your facial expression changes. Like you go, that's it, and then every time I've seen you go conceptual, you smile, and the kids start to smile, and so that's like not something we would have named as an impact, but it has rehooked kids into the lesson the times that I've seen you do it, and kids like perk up in their seats and stuff like that. So awesome to see. Today we're going to look at your test, as you know. So first, let's go to this rubric and root ourselves in the keys to an exemplar response. So the things that kiddos have to do to get a 6, what are they? You just read them off.
Oh, okay. Offer an insightful analysis of the author's purpose. Provide persuasive analysis of how the author's use of language reveals purpose and meaning. Supply specific, detailed supporting textual evidence and are well organized. Are distinguished by varied sentence structure, effective word choice, and sense of voice. And demonstrate consistent and effective control of standard written English grammar and mechanics, although they may not be completely without errors.
Perfect. And I captured that up here. Kind of in those 5 buckets as we look at student responses. So before we start, I went through it and reread Madeline Albright's speech, and so I want to norm on what do we think is the claim here for the author's purpose. What is her purpose? I couldn't find your I know you have an exemplar somewhere, but I couldn't find it. So
I think her purpose is to, because it's a commencement speech, to motivate the people. Well, it's a women's college, so motivate the women that they can make a difference, that the world is in progress, and if they look at examples across the world, they can enact positive change throughout the world if they aim high enough.
Right, and then the second part of that is like, even if it's challenging, right?
Right.
To keep going.
Yeah.
Right, so I'm going to capture that up here. So say that again.
So the women can enact change.
So I think you said motivate, right?
Yeah, to motivate.
To motivate. To enact change.
Yeah. And then, the other part is to motivate, to enact change even when it requires perseverance.
To motivate even when perseverance required. My R's and D's end up looking the same. Cool. So it's kind of 2 parts of it. The first part is like the, do change like your country, and the second part of that is like and even when it's hard. There's a clear shift in it. So the use of language to reveal purpose. What were the 2 key things you wanted kids to say?
For the use of language?
What are the 2 literary devices?
Well, there's more than 2.
Yeah, what are the most clear 2, and then we'll put some underlined.
They could analyze, and they don't have to actually name the devices, but they can analyze anecdote if they wanted. They could analyze anaphora and any sort of repetition.
I would say these are the secondary ones. For me, I saw these 2 as the primary ones. Repetition. What else?
Also, any sort of They could technically also just zoom in on like, words and phrases. They don't have to like.
Word choice.
They don't have to call it. They don't have to name the device to get it right or to do it right.
I do think anecdote and aphra, though, those are things like you explicitly went over in class, and that she like very clearly uses
Right. So we
throughout
want
this.
them to use it, but
Most kids did.
yeah.
They really did. That was pretty cool to see. And it was nice because I happened to be in the lesson for the aphra lesson, and then to see them writing about it was pretty cool to see how far our kiddos have come. Anyways, let's look at some student work samples. I spilled a little chili on Kristan's, I'm sorry, but let's look at Kristan's with my lunch on it. And let's look at Kristan's introductory paragraph. And how does Kristan's introductory paragraph meet the mark of the exemplar, and then how is he off?
I think that he shows a clear understanding of the text because he knows that she wants them to make change, and he also shows that she wants them to keep going even when people try to stop you. And I mean, he names the devices and he has claims, but I think the first reason in his thesis is really strong, and the second one, like how the higher you aim, the more people will try to stop you. That's kind of weak.
Yeah, and I think like his is strong. I think his is like almost all the way there, but he doesn't quite capture the shift in the text whenever it goes from like this like an aphra to anecdotes, and how it like, you know, this call to action piece to like the actual stories. He doesn't quite capture that second part, and then so I think that's why it's a little gray in the second part here too. But this is quite strong. I enjoyed reading Kristan's. Let's look at Tyrone's. Tyrone and Cadrell. Tyrone and Cadrell were also higher kiddos, but look at what they put for their statement of the author's purpose. Sorry, tell me about Cadrell and Tyrone. What is their gap between their author's purpose statement and that exemplar?
I mean, Cadrell has this little line where women have hardships because they're women. That's not necessarily in the text. But I'm not really sure what's not in the text here.
I would say, so for Tyrone, it says, although women, I can't read upside down like that. Although women today have more rights, freedom, and even power than they used to have, they are still limited at reaching their full potentials. This kind of has to do with like the theme of the text, but does this actually identify Albright's purpose, which was to motivate and enact change, and to motivate even when perseverance is required.
But, yeah, I guess I don't really teach them to put the purpose in. Like, this is supposed to be a summary right here.
So where would you teach them to put the purpose?
His thesis is his problem. He doesn't have a purpose in his thesis.
Through the use of rhetorical strategies such as, but at no point here though that does he mention what the author's purpose is, which is like the first.
Well, he's saying that it's to teach and emphasize, but he doesn't list a specific message, so his thesis isn't quite right.
Right. So okay, if it's here, then he's still saying teach and emphasize, but he's not. It's not really to teach; it's to motivate to enact change.
Yeah, but yeah, It just depends what he says in the body paragraphs. Like, let's see. That women in the world that if you challenge everyone's beliefs, members of custom change, there'll be pushback, but it's up to you to keep going and fighting. It's like, he said, he's using the word emphasize, but the purpose right here is the same. That you keep fighting for what you believe in. And so, like, he's using this word because repetition is used to emphasize. And so that's essentially the same thing, it's just using a different word.
He's explaining it here, but like the initial claim does have to be made in that first part on the AP
Right.
language rubric in order to get like.
Yeah.
that
No, I
thing.
agree.
So, the reason why I would say his like author's purpose statement is incorrect is because of this, like, to teach it. I mean, I guess like technically you're teaching through these anecdotes, but that's not the real purpose. She's not trying to like teach them solving linear equations or something like that. She's trying to motivate them. What about Cadrell? You said a little bit, but I want to kind of zoom into hers.
I mean, she does have she says motivate the audience to fight no matter the cost. But they need to have a complex issue, so she should have a second thing that the author's trying to do as well.
One of the big things with these texts that are used in the AP language exam is that, like 90, I would say maybe more than 90% of the time, there's always a shift in the text. And teaching kids like how to identify like the shift in the text and knowing that there's always going to be kind of like a complex message. Like at first glance, some kind of question stem like that. And so does Cadrell capture both key ideas of her message?
No.
No. Okay. Demetrius is another kiddo. I'm gonna reread through these because knowing that you teach them to do it at the end, I'm gonna look at this one again while you look at Demetrius. What about Demetrius?
So he has like the bones of a complex idea, but he just doesn't have. You could say she teaches, but you have to have the right thing here, and he doesn't have the right ideas.
And Brandon's is super sweet. He says, Albert conveys her message on how we can achieve the achievable and the impossible. And Xavier says something in fact we can all make everywhere peaceful or something like that, right? So they have like the theme of this, but they're not like specifically naming what is her purpose, and in this case, like what is her dual purpose in this particular speech. So based upon these student work samples, what is the highest leverage thing for us to go after with the kiddos?
Author's purpose.
And being more specific. Because again, like kids are not writing way off things. They understand like the general theme and stuff like that, but they have to be more confident and specific and go after that claim in this first part. So I have an idea for how to maybe reteach this, but we gotta think about where we could possibly fit it, given that we have Gatsby and what makes sense. Because I think the gap here is scholars did not identify the message to the graduates, which prevented them, later from fully explaining those literary devices. And we saw that with Tyrone, right? He got not Tyrone, Kristan, right? He kind of alluded to that second part about challenges, and because he didn't fully stamp that, then he didn't stamp that as well as he did the first message, which was the call to action. Okay. So for the reteach, I kind of came up with a plan of maybe doing a close read of this text again, followed by a rewrite of this piece right here, identifying the author's purpose. What are you thinking?
Do not like that.
Okay, tell me more.
Because they read it, that'll be 2 weeks ago, and there's not a lot of motivation to make this better when it's so old. And by the time it's going over, it'll be like a month since they've read it, since they've written it, and I don't ever see anything productive happening whenever you hand them back their writing and say,
Since it's been so long.
revise it.
Mhm.
And
I think for kiddos, if they can get like a higher grade in the grade book and replace the score, that like is motivating for them a little more.
I tried that last time and I only had, I mean, we can literally look at the data because I assigned it as a homework. And
Right, I think like doing it in class and saying like you can
we
rewrite it
did
in
do it
class.
in class though, but I counted, we did it during class, I got 60 minutes, and then I counted it, I said they could take it home, they didn't finish.
Mm-hmm.
And then I counted just having it as a homework, and I
Mm-hmm.
only got 5 per period.
Hmm.
And it was a huge classroom management nightmare the whole day. It's not fun to do stuff when it's, and this was within a 24-hour turnaround.
Yeah. So how can we meaningfully close this gap of author's purpose before the next assessment? Because that's like really the ideal goal. If we don't end up doing this particular speech again, I think we could do something that, you know, kind of almost all these texts have like some kind of
Doing
shift.
this before the next assessment would be a distraction from the assessment because the next assessment is a literary analysis, which is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So it would make the most sense to spiral this back in later.
Like after the break.
Yeah, because this is, it's like the units are completely different.
Mm-hmm.
We go from nonfiction and rhetorical analysis
Right, to
to
Gatsby.
then
Okay.
literary analysis.
I had your quarterly plan pulled up. I do think like this author's purpose thing is something like worth revisiting, and I think, especially if we think about doing some kind of CCRS prep before the IA, and those passages are about like the international, what is it, international trade of animals that they shouldn't, it's about like environmental law, so maybe we can find something related to that to preview the schema that's going to be on the interim, and find some kind of call to action kind of thing where there's a shift and we can, they can work with that. How does that sound?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to do things that you don't find are productive, so I'm trying to hear you, but I also want to make sure we address this gap.
Mm-hmm.
What are you thinking?
Well, I see that as a gap, but I don't think it's the most, like, it might be the most important, like, as far as a reading comprehension skill, but it's not the most important writing skill that they're not doing right. And also, I think the most important writing skill they're not doing right is they don't zoom in on evidence, they don't explain their evidence well, and that's gonna give you more points on a rubric than the other part.
But I would say I don't think they're explaining their evidence well, because I don't think they're making a strong enough claim. Like they're a strong enough specific claim. They're like all of their claims, most of their claims were so broad, whereas if they had made like a very like clear, like, you know, she's motivating to enact change and she's motivating and perseverance is required, they would have chosen more specific evidence.
Maybe. But that's more of a, it's not that they don't understand the claim, it's not that they don't understand how to make a claim, is that so that would be a reading skill that would need to be retaught, because it shows a lack of comprehension of the text. It's not like a writing reteach, it's a reading reteach.
Possibly. I think it's I think it's a reading and a writing. I think it's like a, you know, let's like look at another text and let's do a closed reading and look like specifically at author's purpose. And then, okay, now let's talk about how to write about it. So I don't think it's either or, I do think it's both. And in particularly in this case, it's in a text where there's a shift made and when it's kind of a dual purpose thing.
Okay.
But all of their claims were very broad and not specific enough. And I think if they had made more specific claims, they would have an easier time finding more specific evidence. Because, like, for example, the one about, like, women's drug quadrilles, I think was, like, as a feminist, I was like, yeah, quadrille, but, like, she could have pulled out any piece of evidence to support this because it was so broad.
Well, but this again is a summary, so like, it's not, I don't think it's broad to say she's motivating her audience to fight no matter the cost, like
That's the second part.
Right, so, and that's what I put here, like, she doesn't have a second thing, and that's an issue, but like, this isn't broad, like, that's specific, that answers the exact question.
Mm-hmm, it's the second part of it.
Yeah.
So maybe quadrilles was a bad example, but I do believe that if kiddos are gonna make a more specific claim, then the evidence they select is gonna be better. let's look at after the break, after the next break then, to think about the upcoming interim and what might make sense in terms of looking at some text that will prep kids for the IA, and also go back and look at this scale of like looking for a shift in the text, looking for the author's purpose, and then writing about it.
Okay.
And then if you want, like this is like so old, but you could if you wanted some material for discourse, then you could have some. I'm not sure if it's worthy or not, but you could have some samples on it ready if you did want to do some discourse with it. All right, I just had that interim pulled up like 5 minutes ago, and I think I took it down. I'm sorry. I'm gonna pull up the interim. I'm gonna pull up your pre-AP English too thing. The last time I checked, you hadn't started working on the next unit yet.
Right.
Okay. Pull up that interim one more time, I'm sorry. Just print it for Haley. Also, just because the second interim has so much to do with like the cause and effect in the relationships, like looking for those shifts will be a helpful skill for the interim also. Sorry, I'm trying to find it. Let's see. Teachers. And did they update it after you emailed?
I don't know.
Okay. Let me just put 77. I really had this up like. Yep. Again, it doesn't have to be related to the the topics that are in the interim, but like you said, it always helps if kids have some previous knowledge. And when I was reading about this one, this really went right into AP Environmental Science and trying to rack my brain of speeches that I know of. I would have to think on this, but like the CITES treaty is what this one is all about, and then this one is about like the Florida Keys and the Everglades. You know, you took this, but like there might be some kind of speech about when they made the Everglade Conservation, the Wetland Conservation Act or something like that. You're never this quiet. I feel like you're holding back thoughts.
No, I'll find one.
Okay, I'm gonna rack my brain too, but I think
I don't like the idea of choosing a text. I feel like that's kind of cheating. I don't like that.
oh, before the interim?
Yeah.
Oh, so then don't do that. I was just trying to find something that you don't have to do that. I thought you would be motivated by that. So if you're demotivated by that,
No, I want the kids to do well without having
that's fine.
that.
I was just top of brain, but I thought environmental policy, it's also what I happen to teach, so I like this test. But any kind of speech where there's a shift, which is any AP language text, then a rhetorical analysis essay, then that'll work. Do you have a speech in the top of your head?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay.
Yeah, I'll find one.
Okay.
I already have that as part of my laser to do.
Okay.
Point of view and purpose during the 2 weeks before. 2 weeks, we come back. 2.
Okay. Sounds good. So definitely plan to do that. Sounds like something you're already gonna do. But I do want to stamp that. I don't believe kids fully explained that the Larry devices because they weren't making a clear, specific statement of the author's purpose that included both key ideas there. So the key thing to stamp in this reteach is like there's 2 key messages here and there's a shift.
Mm-hmm.
I watched this one AP language teacher once, and she even like had kiddos draw a line in the text every time there was a shift, and And she said, you know, if you get to the AP language exam and you're not sure where the shift is, just draw it in the middle and one, you know, often that's where it is. So they can realize, like, okay, there is, like, not necessarily a conflicting message, but a different messages here, and that's okay, and your brain's not tricking you. So, all right, so what is the key thing you're going to emphasize in this little reteach that you're going to do after the break?
That the authors have complex purposes, and there's more than one thing they're trying to get the audience to glean, and sometimes those things are just additions, sometimes they're might seem even contradictory, so you can be like, you should do this, but you shouldn't do it this way, or whatever.
Awesome. Okay. Do you need anything else from me on your laser? I read through your thing.